This is my 1981 C1500 pickup, which we just finished installing a completely redone 350 small block in. In the last video, you guys saw that we did the camshaft break-in. So now I want to go ahead and get this on the lift in order to drain the oil and do a filter cut on it. Make sure there's no metal in the oil or the oil filter. Now our hoist is rated for 10,000 pounds, and I'm sure that it could pick this thing up in its current orientation, which would be backwards. However, just to be safe, I think I'm gonna get this thing turned around and put it on the hoist the right way. And in order to do that, we've got to do a couple things on the ground first. This truck does start and run, but it does not drive. And there's two reasons for that. Number one, the clutch isn't hooked up. And number two, the gear shift mechanism isn't hooked up. So let's get this thing on some jack stands and hook both of those two things up, and then we can pull this out, turn it around, and put it on the hoist. Alright, so the clutch and the shifter are all hooked up. Theoretically, we should be able to push the clutch in and shift this thing through all the gears. So this is a 3-speed on the tree transmission, so 3 gears and reverse, obviously. So let's go ahead and make sure that everything is happy here. First gear is towards you and down, so that's first. Second is away from you and up, that is second. And away from you and straight down is third gear. And then reverse is back to neutral, and then towards you and up, and that is reverse. So feels like we have all the gears, which is mucho bueno. Let's get this thing back off of the jack stands, and hopefully we can get this thing to drive under its own power for the first time. So now this is off the jack stands, just a couple more small preliminary things we have to do before this thing can drive under its own power. Objective number one, like we talked about in the break-in video, once this thing gets off of its high idle cam, this cable does not reach this throttle connection here. So we got to adjust this so that this can be fully pulled back to its idle position. Much better. So I ended up having to flip this bracket around, and it seems to be working a lot better. If we take this off of the high idle cam, this thing is fully backed off, and the spring is able to pull this all the way into its idle position. I also went ahead and put a little bit of a more permanent clip on the throttle so that this doesn't pop off. So now that all of that stuff is hooked up, this thing should move under its own power, which means we can get this thing onto the hoist. And there's only one problem with that. As you can see, we have recently gotten absolutely smoked with snow. And since my truck is only 2-wheel drive with an open diff on summer tires, I'm afraid that when we go out to turn this thing around, it's gonna get stuck. So before we can flip this thing around and put it on the hoist, let's go ahead and go outside and clear some of the snow out front of the entrance. All right guys, moment of truth. Does this thing move under its own power? So it officially moves under its own power. Sounds like on the belt front, we're actually doing pretty good. Not as much squealing, however, that squealing didn't really start until it warmed up, so we'll have to see once we can do another warm-up cycle on this thing. It also sounds like we have to add a little bit of power steering fluid, as that has probably bled out from me turning it around outside, since when we had to start it over here, obviously I wasn't turning the steering wheel, so that probably just needs to be topped up. That's that whining noise that you guys were hearing as I was driving it in. But anyways, let's get this thing up on the hoist, and we can drop the oil out of it, and then we can go ahead and do a oil filter cut and see if my camshaft has survived. So let's cross our fingers and our toes and everything else that hopefully there is no metal in the filter or the oil. Now that we got this up, we can go ahead and drain the oil and pull that filter, and let's see how our camshaft did during the break-in. It was a little darker than I was expecting, but then again, it's not like we fully cleaned out the motor on this thing. There still would have been a little bit of sludge in it. Not seeing anything on the magnet, so that's a good sign. Just looking at the oil, I don't have 100% confirmation that the cam has broken in properly, so that means we got to move on to doing a filter cut on this thing. So let's get this oil filter off of here, get her on the bench, open her up, and see if we see anything crazy. So normally when I do a filter cut, I'm looking for two things. The first is any metal or material in the pleats of the filter itself. And if we go through this filter, I'm not really seeing anything super concerning. Looking pretty normal. There might be a little tiny bit more than what you see on an everyday vehicle, but no crazy chunks or anything weird going on in here. So that's a plus. And then the second thing that I look for when I do a filter cut is anything at the bottom of the filter itself. So if there's anything weird going on, it's kind of going to be hard to see for you guys. Usually you'll see some sort of chunkiness or pieces of metal or anything at the bottom of the filter. Just looking at this, I'm not seeing anything out of the ordinary after a camshaft break-in. So I think it is safe to say that this camshaft did in fact survive the break-in, just judging by what the oil looks like. Now, is this to say that we are 100% safe? No. There's always a possibility that once you do start driving this thing, that the camshaft is going to wear at an excessive rate. And the only way to tell if that's happening is to actually drive it and then monitor it over the next couple of oil changes to make sure that you're not getting any more metal going through the filter or going through the oil. So I just realized while editing this thing that I never officially made an outro for this episode. So this is my official outro for today's video. I know I don't sound super pumped in the video about my camshaft breaking in properly, but I'm pretty stoked on it, and I cannot wait for the warmer weather to come so that we can drive this thing. Still got quite a bit of work to do on the truck before it can go away for the rest of the winter. So if you're not subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the future episodes. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.